Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our March Teach Educational Rounds. Here with us today, we have Rosa Dragonetti, who will be presenting on guiding change using motivational interviewing to address vaping. And so we'll begin with our CAMH land acknowledgement. CAMH is situated on lands that have been occupied by First Nations for millennia, lands rich in civilizations with knowledge of medicine, architecture, technology, and extensive trade routes throughout the Americas. In 1860, the site of CAMH appeared in the Colonial Records Office of the British Crowns as the council grounds of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, as they were known at the time. And today, Toronto is covered by the Toronto Purchase Treaty Number 13 of 1805 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Toronto is now home to a vast diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis who enrich this city. CAMH is committed to reconciliation. We will honor the land through programs and places that reflect and respect its heritage. We will embrace the healing traditions of the ancestors and weave them into our caring practices. We will create new relationships and partnerships with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and share the land and protect it for future generations. And so now everyone's welcome to, introduce yourselves in the chat. You can share maybe where you're joining us from today. And you're also welcome to share something you're currently doing to improve or learn your commitment to reconciliation. And so if you're unsure where you're joining us from today, I'll put a link in the chat that you can use to find out. And in the meantime, I'm just going to keep on going with some more housekeeping items before we get started. So just a reminder that if you did want to receive a letter of completion for this Teach Educational Rounds, to make sure that you first registered for the webinar and completed the full pre-learning assessment. Also that for today, you're signed into the webinar using your first and last name so we can identify you, and also to complete the evaluation and the post-learning assessment, and both of those will be sent out at the end of the webinar to everyone who registered. And so a bit about our presenter, Rosa. Rosa is a psychotherapist in private practice. She was the past project director at CAMH at our Intrepid Lab, where she played a very key role in developing strategy for education and program initiatives, including the Teach Project. She has an academic appointment as assistant professor at the University of Toronto, Department of Community and Family Medicine. She has extensive experience in motivational interviewing, including developing curriculum for new courses in MI, as well as serving as a faculty for many introduction and advanced workshops. She currently leads motivational interviewing workshops in the community and provides coaching in MI to staff working at the Department of Child and Family Services in LA. Welcome, Rosa. We're excited to have you here today. And I'll give everyone a moment to read through her disclosures. And this is just a note that all eligible Teach Educational Rounds presenters are offered an honorarium. And that being said, acceptance of this honorarium does not impact presentation content. And as well, the content of Teach Educational Rounds are centered on the following evidence-based guidelines. And these materials, as well as their verbal presentation and any discussion, represent only general principles, and they do not remove the need for clinical assessments or treatment plans by healthcare professionals. So with that, I'll pass it along to Rosa to get started today.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, and welcome everyone. I was just looking at some of the attendee names, seeing lots of familiar faces out there, or names anyway, so hello to everybody and welcome. So today we're going to talk about using MI to address vaping among our clients. I am going to, of course, now it's not going to work. Oh no, Rachel, it's not working. We just tested it. It worked.
We're having, yeah, WebEx is finicky. Yeah. Maybe if you press the arrow on the keyboard, does that work?
No.
No. Is there an arrow above the slides to click?
Ah,
Oh,
yes,
perfect.
yes, yes. Okay, I'll have to use that. Okay, fine. There's always an issue
Yeah.
with technology. It's okay. It's only been 6 years, right? But that's okay. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so these are our learning objectives. I'm not going to go into too much. I'm assuming that most of you know a little bit about MI, so I'm not going to really do like a really deep dive into all the skills, concepts, etc. I'll do like a quick review. But really it's about, I want to look at how can we apply some of the concepts, skills, foundations to vaping, and see how that might be different than what you've been doing with tobacco. Okay, so how many of you feel more confident treating tobacco smoking, like cigarette smoking, versus vaping?
I can open the poll now if you wanted to do a poll for it.
Sure. I see some thumbs up though. Yeah, I hear this a lot, that people do feel more confident, but let's see how all of you are feeling.
If anyone can see the QR code, it should be on the screen, or you can go to slido.com. We're going to use it a couple times throughout the webinar, so you could keep it open. And the passcode should be at the bottom as well. Okay.
Oh, here we go. More confident. And if you can, just drop in the chat, maybe why? Like, what is it about vaping that makes you feel less confident? Vaping is newer. Yeah. We don't have robust evidence or guidance for vaping cessation. Absolutely. It's hard to do something when we don't know what we're really doing, but we do. We do. Okay. Dosage calculation. Absolutely. So let's talk about what I'm not going to be talking about today. I'm not going to go into the details on how to quit vaping for sure. So this is we're really going to focus on, how do we actually get clients to want to quit smoking, to quit vaping, pardon me. Okay, so let me take back control. Thank you. Yeah, great. Keep the comments coming in. Okay. And let's look at, another, oh no, never mind. We already put this in the chat. It's okay. Sorry, Rachel, I got ahead of myself. But anyway, we were hearing some of the, it looks like a lot of the challenges actually have to do more with actually helping people quit, literally when their people are ready, when they've made the decision to quit vaping. How do you actually help? And yes, there are solid guidelines in terms of how to do that. There are some, though. I know that when I was still at CAMH, we had put that together. So there are some. We don't know dosages of NRT into vaping, etc. But again, today we're not going to get into that. We're actually going to take a step back and actually help. How do we help clients get to the place where they want to actually quit smoking? Okay, so let's see if we can do that. Now, what I hear often is that, well, the ambivalence feels a little bit different with clients who vape versus those who smoke. And so if ambivalence is different, should our MI strategy be any different? And the the answer is not necessarily. Now, there might be a couple of nuances that we'll talk about today, but here's what we know will not fix this problem. And fixes in quotes, because you'll know this is the writing reflex or the fixing reflex, right? So we know that doesn't work. So we're going to try hard not to use some of these ways of communicating. So here's your super quick review, right? Unique to motivational interviewing are a couple of things. One is the spirit of motivational interviewing. Everything else you'll kind of find in other ways of communicating, but the spirit is the foundations of motivational interviewing. And without this, we're just using skills, right? So I'm really going to focus a lot on the spirit throughout the presentation, and you'll hear things like connecting, respecting autonomy, etc. The skills that you're using are ORs, right? Your open questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries. So those are you're going to use at every stage that you're working with your clients. The tasks, you notice I'm using the newer language, although it's already been, we're going into 3 years now. The tasks used to be the processes. All four are important, but the ultimate, or the most important part is the engaging. So again, I'm going to focus a lot on engaging with our clients because we're going to be talking about clients who are ambivalent about quitting vaping. And that actually comes from you because you've all sent in some of your questions. And that's what was really highlighted among questions that you have. So we're going to focus a lot on engagement. And of course, the target goal in using all of this is to evoke change talk and soften sustained talk. This is also very unique to motivational interviewing that you don't really get in other forms of communication. So we're listening and trying to evoke that change talk. There are other skills, of course, in MI, and we're going to talk about all of these. So, elicit, provide, elicit, now called ask, tell, ask. I feel like this is such an elegant way of providing information or advice, very collaborative, scaling questions, looking back, looking forward, normalizing ambivalence, because this is a very normal state for all of us when we're trying to make changes. And one thing I find that's not often talked about, but I find very powerful, is harm reduction. Sorry, I'm reading the comments, is the values exploration. Values can be very powerful, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so Rachel, it looks like this slide format doesn't have the animations. It's okay. So my question would have been, what are some common MI errors that you find yourself doing? I know for me, the first one, even after like 20 plus years of doing this, I still find myself engaging in the fixing reflex. With some clients in particular, I feel like there's this urgent need to help them, to really want them to change. And I slip into trying to like convince them that yes, this is the right thing to do. But these are just a few things. I saw a couple of other things like praising versus affirming. Another common one is, and this one is a sneaky one, it's that stealth education or information sharing where, oh no, I'm not really doing it. But if you listen to yourself and listen to what you're saying, you're slipping it in there. And I provided a few examples in slides to talk about how does this actually slip in. It's like, I'm not giving advice, I'm not providing information, and yet it can get very sneaky and come in. And of course, moving too quickly through the tasks, right? It's like, let's focus, let's evoke the reasons as to why the person changed and move into planning. And many times we're not going to get to planning with a lot of clients. We may not even get to evoking the reasons, but I'm going to use the tasks in a slightly different way to show what we can do. Okay, so thank you to Rachel who sent out the question to all of you in terms of what's that client that's you're struggling with? What are the questions you have? We got quite a few questions, so I appreciate that. Thank you. I can't go through all of them. I think we'll see. I picked two really common ones I think that came across, and we'll work through those together. And then hopefully I'll have time and I will touch on some of the other ones. This way you get all your questions answered. Please ask questions throughout the presentation. You don't have to ask until the end. Rachel's going to help me monitor because multitasking for me is a no-go. And so Rachel, just flag when there's a question and we'll stop and address it. So let's start with the first one. So the common scenario that came across was, a student, I picked 17-year-old student who says, everybody vapes, I'm not worried about it, right? Because it's not going to happen to me. And transport yourself back to being a teenager. I know I was like this. It's like, oh, everybody talks about eating healthy. Who cares? Like, that's for older people, 40, 50 years old. Same thing with vaping and smoking. That's not something that that students worry about or youth worry about. What do you automatically want to do here when you have a student in front of you and they say this. What's your automatic go-to? Just plop it in the chat. I'll open it up so I can see what you're saying. And don't think about, the ultimate MI. What do you really want to do? What does your gut tell you? Yeah, but, oh yes, for sure. I can relate to that one. Urge to share the risks, tell them the health risks. Yeah, your automatic instinct is to say, oh, I'm going to tell it. Well, it's like, you should be worried about it. Well, there are risks, right? And what's that going to do? Going to push people further away because they already don't want to hear this. And so let's refrain on giving that information and telling them about how dangerous this can be, and nicotine is not good for a teenager's brain, and all that stuff, regardless if it's true, is not going to be helpful at this stage. So let's look at what some more positive MI moves might be. And again, I'm going to guide the conversation through the 4 tasks, but it's going to be slightly different than what we know about the 4 tasks. So first of all, take a step back and ask yourself, what is my goal here? Is my goal to get this person to commit to quitting vaping? It's actually not. Your goal is not to try to change their mind. At the beginning, it's really about evoking some of that discrepancy and bringing the ambivalence to the table. So let's see how we might do that. Here are some suggestions. Again, I will emphasize throughout the entire presentation that engagement is the most important thing. Without this, everything you do will probably be a waste of time. We need to connect with the client. We need to establish that trust so that they don't get defensive and they drop some of that. I'm not saying resistance in an MI term, resistance in that I don't want to talk to you. Like this is not helpful. You're just another person telling me what to do. So I'm going to take time. I'm going to go slowly, and I'm going to engage with that client and establish that relationship. So let's look at how we can do this. Well, I'm going to still, I'm going to engage, and I'm still going to pay attention to sustain talk and change talk. And I want to notice sustain talk, which is what they're probably going to give you at the very beginning if they don't think there's anything wrong with vaping. So a couple of questions, from where you sit, vaping doesn't seem like a big risk. I'm not agreeing with them. I'm just evoking or, reflecting, some of that sustained talk. And what am I doing? I'm trying to understand what's their perspective. And again, I want to avoid arguing with the client. I'm just here to understand. I can actually make them feel heard by continuing to reflect that ambivalence or the sustained talk. You've seen a lot of people doing it and nothing terrible happening, right? So again, I'm only focused on engaging, and by doing this, that can help establish that relationship. Now, typically with focusing, it's like, let's set up the goals, right? But here the goal is going to be a little bit different in terms of the goal may actually be just talking about it. That's all we're going to do today. Our goal is to talk about vaping. And here's one way to ask that, right? Would it be okay if we talked a little about vaping and how it fits into your life? Why is this an important way of asking and establishing the focus? Because it respects autonomy. I'm suggesting that we talk about vaping because I have some concerns, but I'm not telling them, yes, let's do that. I am going to invite them to give me permission to do that. Okay, so I'm going to help focus the conversation on vaping, not on quitting. I might ask, what do you enjoy about vaping? So now again, I continue to evoke some of that sustained talk and reflect the sustained talk. And most people say, well, we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to soften sustained talk and evoke change talk, which is very true. However, if you listen to Miller and Rolnick, they talk about early on, especially in the engagement process, it's okay to do this. It's actually helpful to do this because what are we doing in engagement? I'm not developing discrepancy yet. I'm not evoking that ambivalence. I'm simply engaging with the client. I'm listening to understand, and that sustained talk is going to give me valuable information that I will use later to help guide my conversation. So you're actively listening for, what is their perspective? Why do they like vaping? What function does it serve in their life? So at this point, sustained talk is okay. Now, evoking is also quite unique to motivational interviewing. And typically in the evoking task, what we're doing is we're evoking the reasons for change. And this starts to get at that. However, notice how gentle this is, and we're going to move really, really slow. I'm not going to talk about, what are some of your reasons for quitting? Because the client is just not there. So I'm not going to push it. But I am going to start to introduce some of that language or evoke some of that language, right? On the one hand, vaping feels pretty harmless to you. On the other hand, some people talk about some possible risks, right? So I've used a double-sided reflection here to gently highlight some of that ambivalence. Now, you notice I didn't say, on the one hand, you feel vaping is harmless, and you also think there are possible risks. So the client actually said, not worried about it. But I am going to introduce very gently with very tentative language to highlight that, to do the double-sided reflection. So what do I mean by that? Is yes, they've said vaping feels pretty harmless. That's something. And then I will plant in the idea that some people talk about some possible risks. Very tentative. I am refraining from that stealth way of introducing, absolutely, yes, of course there are risks. Yes, it is harmful. I'm not going to do that, but I am introducing the possibility that we might consider this. Okay, so it's very gentle, and I'm trying to start highlighting some of the ambivalence by doing this kind of reflection. Again, no questions, right? Okay. All right. While you're evoking, and a really important way of evoking is to be curious, genuinely curious. I do want to understand, what is it that they, how are they looking at this? How are they seeing vaping? I am curious. So instead of telling them about the risks, I'm going to try to evoke it from them. What have you heard about vaping that makes people concerned? So, these questions need to be quite strategic. I'm really using words that I'm not going to push the client. I might have said, what have you heard about vaping that is concerning? They may not have, but what makes other people concerned? So you can see I'm really going slowly with this, not pushing. I'm not saying, what have you heard? It's, what have you heard about other people and their concerns? I hope that makes sense. Okay, you could also try looking forward, but again, you're still trying to be curious. Again, this is where the stealth information or stealth pushing comes in, because by looking forward, my goal is not to highlight for them, this is what's going to happen if you continue vaping long term. I'm coming at it from a very curious standpoint. I want to know what they think. If nothing changed and you kept vaping the same way for a few years, what do you think that might look like? I am genuinely interested in what they think. There is a possibility that the client is going to come back and say, everything is going to be fine. I'm not worried about this. What's the big deal? That's still important information, and that is going to now guide the direction you're going to go into. And you might have to slow it down even further. But let's assume we're making some progress here, and let's continue. Another strategy, I really love the scaling questions, because you can have a huge conversation with clients and evoke lots of change talk just with a few questions. So, again, most of you know the scaling questions. On a scale of 10, how concerned are you about vaping? Now, the magic really happens. That's a great way to start the conversation, but the magic happens really in the follow-up questions. This is where you're going to get the change talk, right? So let's say they say, I don't know, maybe like a 3 or 4. Okay, that's how concerned they are. Why are you at a 4 and not a 0? And what's that going to do? What are clients going to give you? What kind of information? They're going to start to say why they are concerned. What are some of their concerns, right? So there is another way to ask them about their own concerns without asking them, right? Is why are you at a 4 and not a 0? Be really careful. You are not asking why are you a 4 and not a 10? That's going to elicit sustained talk. We're not going to go that way. We ask why a 4, not a 0. The second follow-up question, of course, is what would it take or what would concern you to get from a 4 to a 5 to a 6, not to a 10? I'm going to go slowly. And again, that will elicit more change talk. They might say things like, well, if we knew for sure that it caused something, a health issue, that might concern me. Or if, if it affected my lungs and I'm an athlete and I might not get a scholarship to the university because of this, that might make me more concerned, right? So you're going to start to hear what their concerns are without actually asking that. So I love the scaling questions because you can get so much information from clients, including change talk. Okay, are we, the answers are already given, but okay, are we ready to start planning at this stage? What do people think? The client starts to say, yeah, I am a little bit concerned. I'm at a 4 or 5. Maybe they're even at a 6. Are you ready to start planning? No, the answer is no. We're not ready to start planning in a sense of, how we define planning. Planning is, the stage where you start to actually develop a quit plan or a reduction plan and what are the steps you're going to take. We're not close to that at all. And if we jump to that, which is what a lot of us do, we start to hear a little bit of change talk and we get excited. It's like, oh, they are concerned. Okay, so let's figure out what your goals are and then let's start planning. That's going to lose them. All the work that you've done to engage that client, you're going to start to lose it. And by the way, engagement happens throughout all the tasks, not just at the beginning. So paying attention constantly to our relationship with them. But if they do express some curiosity or concern about vaping, for example, I guess I don't love being dependent on it. Again, don't jump on that. That is not an invitation to say, okay, let's go for it. Let's quit and let's make a plan. Gently shift with reflection. So being in control matters to you. What do you think your next step might be? And this response helps to continue to support that autonomy. What did I do here? I reflected a value, being in control. That's one of their values. That's our goal, whatever that, or never mind. Being in control matters to you, right? So I reflected that back to them so that they're hearing what they're saying. And then my planning literally involves, what do you think your next step might be? And they get to decide what that is. And next steps, again, are not steps to reduce or to quit. It's what do they feel they want to do next. So I'm inviting them to make that decision, supporting their autonomy. And in one session with your client, you might not get them to a place where they're going to say, yes, I'm ready to quit. Let's do it. It might be something like, I think I'm going to go away and think a little bit more. And we need to be okay with that. And that's progress, by the way, because, how do you help them shift from when they first started this session till the end? Have they shifted even a little bit? That's progress. And again, with youth, with vaping, it might look a little bit different in that it's slower, and you're really focused on engaging and not coming in and trying to lecture, give information, convince, etc. Okay, no questions so far. All right, so just to kind of summarize what I've talked about so far, resist that fixing reflex. Don't argue about the risks. A lot of us do that. We go into it. I still catch myself doing that. I have a few clients who are vaping. Some of them are smoking, using cannabis. And my I want to just tell them about, I'm so depressed every day. I can't do anything. I have no motivation. It's like, well, you just quit the cannabis use. You could feel so much better. That's my gut instinct. That's what I want to do. But I know that's not going to help. I know that's not going to work. So I'm going to resist doing that. Instead, I am going to listen to understand, and I'm going to bring that empathy, and I'm going to reflect the sustained talk with no judgment. And again, why am I doing that? So that I can help help to get a better understanding of where vaping fits, what vaping does for them, where does it fit in their life. And the focus may not be on changing the behavior right away. The focus might be on just talking about vaping. How does it fit within your life? You are going to, try to develop discrepancy. Now with you, what I my understanding, some of my experience is really about evoking their values or their goals to highlight that discrepancy, because it's about what they think is important, not what we think is important, because it's going to be different. And remember,
Rosa,
yeah.
sorry, someone wanted to know, how do you counsel patients who say it reduces their anxiety?
So actually, before I answer, how would you do that? What would people do based on what we've talked about today? My gut, here's what my gut tells me. It's like, does it really reduce your anxiety? It's like, well, no, what we actually know is that, and then I would go into that. That's what I really want to do, but it's not helpful. What would you do? I'm going to ask others first and then can provide my reflection. Saying it worsens, can ask why it reduces. What did you do before you vaped? What do people do for their anxiety if you don't vape? Okay, so do you have other methods? Okay, so not some pretty good responses there. So thank you. So again, the your gut instinct or the inclination is to tell them that they're wrong, right? So are you telling them that they're wrong by by again, that watch out for that stealth way of communicating. Are we doing that by asking open-ended questions, by reflecting? Your questions, your open-ended questions, your reflections have to be very strategic. Remember, no judgment, and you're not going to contradict them at this point. So depending on where you are in your relationship with them, you might reflect that, but you're not necessarily going to tell them, no, it's not really helpful. You have other skills. Why don't we use those? Those are not bad questions, but at the beginning, they're not they're not the best questions to ask, because you really, really, really want to understand. And they're telling you what vaping does for them. Sorry, I'm trying to like balance talking and looking at some of these comments. There was, yeah, so affirming the utility, right? That's your job right now, is to really understand, how does vaping fit with them? What is the benefit? And they're talking about anxiety. So at this stage, I'm not going to I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong. I'm not going to tell them that, well, there are other ways to deal with anxiety. I'm going to just reflect that, validate that for them, and then I'm going to continue to engage. At some point, and in the next case that we'll talk about how do you give some of that information, and maybe then we can continue answering this question. So just be really careful. Lots of great responses there. But I also heard some responses where you're coming in stealth, thinking, I'm just going to engage this client, I'm going to ask open-ended questions, I'm going to reflect. But hidden beneath that is, I'm telling you this is not effective. So just be mindful of that. Okay. Let's see how we can do that. Okay, so this is not exactly that case, but another scenario that some of you had sent over was the adult who thinks that vaping is actually safe, and they've just quit smoking. And this one is going to be probably a very common one. I quit smoking cigarettes and now I vape. It's harmless compared to cigarettes, so I'm good. Now, kind of true, isn't it, that smoking is much worse than vaping? So their statement is not wrong. So I'm not going to go in and tell them, well, it's not completely harmless. It's what I want to do, but I'm not going to do that, right? So instead, let's look at some of the things, right? Again, I'll emphasize the writing reflex or the fixing reflex, right? So again, you want to say things like, well, it's not harmless. You quit smoking. You have the skills to quit this too. Technically, you're still addicted to nicotine. So look at that second statement. You quit smoking. You have the skills to quit too. That is an affirmation, technically, right? I'm affirming that they quit smoking and they've got some skills, but I'm telling them what they should do. And again, it's very subtle. And this is what we need to pay attention to. When we are reflecting, when we are affirming, am I communicating my judgment, my goals in there versus literally affirming the client for the effort that they made? So pay attention to some of the things that we're saying and how we're saying them. Because it might feel like, yep, this is MI because I'm providing an affirmation, but is it? Because you quit smoking, you have the skills to quit this too, is quite directive. It's not really the affirmations we're looking for. So again, we're focused on engaging. Even with this client, the client is telling you, I'm not interested. So I'm not going to, lecture them and tell them what to do because that's not going to help. I'm going to focus on engaging. Use your skills, right? Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections. But again, these have to be quite strategic. We're not just asking general open questions. Here, of course, what do you want to focus on? Right? I'm going to give them the control. It's like, okay, you quit smoking, you're still vaping, you think it's okay. So what do you want to focus on? Right? Let's invite the client to set the agenda. Here's an affirmation. Switching away from cigarettes was a big step. I am going to validate, I am going to affirm because quitting smoking is really difficult and they achieved that. So I'm going to affirm and I'm not going to talk about, well, what about vaping? That's not part of the affirmation. And I'm going to reflect. And again, you are reflecting sustained talk here. But again, during the engagement process, it's okay to do that. From your perspective, vaping feels like a much safer option, right? From your perspective. I'm not saying I agree with that and aligning with the client, but I am reducing their defensiveness by saying, yeah, from your perspective, there's nothing wrong with vaping. Now, the focus of the conversation, here's where I can, make a suggestion. Again, the focus is not going to be, let's set some goals here for quitting. It's, I'm not going to debate that, but maybe the focus can be, I don't know, let's talk about the long-term effects of vaping. So where do you see vaping fitting into your life long-term? That's going to give me a sense of what the client's goals are. Like, is this like, leave me alone for now, I just quit smoking, I need some time? Or is this more of, no, I'm going to just vape for the rest of my life, I don't care. I want to get a sense of that. So that's where I'm going to help focus the conversation. I'm going to evoke, but again, not evoking their reasons to quit because they are nowhere near that. They have not said that, but I am going to try to put ambivalence on the table. I want to bring that forth so that then we can actually deal with the ambivalence, address it. And I could do it again with a double-sided reflection. On the one hand, vaping helped you get away from cigarettes. On the other hand, you're still thinking about what role nicotine might play in the long run. So I'm planting that seed of, okay, that's great. It helped you quit. What about long term? What is that going to look like? Just by using a reflection. Now, when can you give information or advice? Let's go back to the question about anxiety, right? Well, nicotine helps my anxiety. It keeps me off cigarettes. So what's the big deal? How can you give information or advice? How do you do that? Drop it in the chat. What am I skill or tool would you use? Always focusing on, remember, engagement. Engagement is the theme throughout. It doesn't happen just at the beginning. It's beginning, middle, and end. Ask for permission. Absolutely. So that's what you're doing, right? We're going to ask for permission. Let's see how we can do that. So we're still going to be collaborative. Remember this spirit. Always incorporate that spirit into your conversation. This is what motivational interviewing is all about. Otherwise, they're just questions. They're just reflections. Be collaborative. And we're going to use ask, tell, ask to share that information. So let's walk through the example. I might ask something like, what have you heard about vaping compared to smoking? Because the client said, vape, smoking, I quit smoking, that's the biggest risk. What's the big deal about vaping? And I'm going to reflect their response. Again, I'm going to pay attention to my response, and I'm listening really careful to what they're saying. I'm going to pay attention, and I want to understand what exactly are they saying. And I'll reflect that response to communicate that understanding. And I'm going to slow it down. What else? Give them time and elicit everything that they know, or most of what they know about vaping compared to smoking. That's where we want to start. And again, your job is to listen carefully. Is the information accurate? Where is this coming from? Are there any values or goals embedded into what they're telling you? Because this is the information you are going to use. Now, you are obviously the tell piece is you're going to give them some information, but ask permission first. Permission doesn't have to be so formal. It's, would it be okay if I shared what we know so far? Would it be okay if I added a couple of additional pieces of information? Right? So asking for permission to share the information, and most of the time the client is going to say, of course, but keep it very brief. This is not an invitation for you to provide all of the literature and research that tells them the risks of vaping and how bad it is, or it doesn't work. It's actually not helping your anxiety. It might feel like it. This is not an invitation to do that. You are providing neutral information. There's no judgment there, and keep it brief. Share one or two pieces of information at a time. Now, if the client knows very little and there's a lot that you think would be helpful, you can do that, but you're going to do several rounds of this. Okay, so this part, a lot of people tend to forget to do, but it's really important because this is what's going to continue to emphasize that autonomy. And again, it's not just, well, it's part of the strategy, so therefore I'm going to ask, what do you think about that? What do you make about? I really do want to understand, how does the client see this? Do they agree? Do they think, nope, not for me, that's not important to me? What am I listening for, right? Listen for the yeah, but yeah, that makes sense, but it doesn't affect me, right? So I'm still paying attention, and this is an extremely important step, so we don't want to skip that. And now I'm going to continue looking for opportunities to evoke change talk, right? So exploring their personal goals. And it might not be quitting, but I'm going to try to guide the conversation, right? So I might use something like looking forward. If nothing changed and you kept vaping the same way for 5 years, how would you feel about that? Right now, I'm asking the client to tap into values. I'm tapping into goals, where I'm asking them to look at, how does vaping fit in their life looking forward? Values exploration. I find this actually an underused exercise, but I find it very powerful, and it really helps to shift the client's perspective in terms of, yeah, even though I enjoy doing this, does it really fit with the person I want to be or the things that matter to me? And so this is how I might use it. It's like, what would success with nicotine look like for you? I'm taking it away from smoking and vaping. Forget that, because the common substance here is nicotine, and this is one of the problems. And so what does success with nicotine look like? How does nicotine fit in your life, fit with the person you want to be? What matters most to you? There's a lot you can do with values, but it really, values basically help to establish a direction for people. It doesn't tell them what to do. It tells them what they want to do. And then, of course, the scaling questions. This is something you can use throughout with every client, right? Asking the scaling question. And again, your questions are going to be very deliberate. So here, the scaling question would be about eventually being nicotine free, right? The importance of that. Okay, so is this person now ready for planning? No, not necessarily in the standard way of the way we define planning. We're not going to start talking about a plan on reducing. We haven't even set those goals yet. But if the person does express a slight interest in reducing nicotine, for example, they might say, I guess I wouldn't mind not depending on it. Reflect that. Don't jump. This is not an invitation. That is not a goal, by the way. It's not a goal in that I want to quit. I guess I wouldn't mind. Think about change talk. Where in the darn cat statements does that fit, right? And reflect it. So being free from nicotine has some appeal. And again, my question is, what would be a first step if you decided to move in that direction? We're not talking about, okay, so if you were going to quit, what would it look like? It's if you're going to move in that direction, what is your first step? A first step might, again, sound similar to the other case that we talked about, in that it's like, I'm going to go home and think about this a bit more. I'll make an appointment and we can continue talking about this. I want more information. That could be a first step. The plan is coming from the client. I'm not going to impose the plan. Okay, so what did we do here? Affirmed the existing change, right? They switched from smoking. That's a great accomplishment. I didn't get into an argument with the client to debate about the safety or, does it help anxiety? I'm not going to debate that. Instead, I used a collaborative approach to elicit what they know about this and then provide some of that information. I evoked some of their personal goals related to long-term nicotine use. Maybe that's a little bit more, they might be more amenable to thinking about that, and supported autonomy throughout, right? So using engagement throughout the entire process. Okay, these are the other scenarios. So we do have some time, so I'm going to quickly go. Rachel, are there other questions that are coming up?
Nothing as of now.
Okay, good. So let's go through some of the other scenarios. And again, I won't get to all of them, but another one is students risking suspension. So I thought this was actually quite relevant. I'm hearing this quite a bit. So again, your automatic reaction might be to say, look, this is serious. You're going to get suspended. So let's make a plan on how that doesn't happen, what we're going to do about it. Sure, that makes sense, but think about that student sitting in front of you. They're upset. They just got caught. They might be feeling all kinds of emotions, scared, angry, anxious, etc. They don't trust you because you're on this side. They're on that side. They see you as those people, right, that are going to, bring down the consequences. So take a step back and focus on autonomy. Build that trust. Engage, right? Now, there are some non-negotiables. Let's be real. This is not about the client can choose whatever they want to choose, and I'm going to support that. I am going to state some of the non-negotiables, like the school has rules about vaping. That's a non-negotiable. I cannot change that, right? And you can even say, the school has rules about vaping, and I have no power to change those. I can't do anything about that. My role isn't to punish you. I want to help you think about what you want to do, right? Look at all the ways that you can emphasize that autonomy. I'm just here to help you think about what you want to do. Okay, so, and that is what our job is. I want to reflect what their perspective is. What is their experience like? What are they feeling? I am not going to jump to quitting vaping with this client because they're facing other consequences. There are things that are actually, in their perspective, potentially more important to figure out. What are the consequences versus quitting vaping? Explore the consequences, don't ignore them. But we're not going to threaten. We're not going to say, well, if you don't do this, you're going to get suspended. Ask them what worries them. What if they don't care about getting suspended? which I have a brother who's a teacher, and there are a lot of kids who don't care. So what do you do with that kid, right? What worries you most about getting caught vaping at school? Maybe there's a whole different reason. Let's tap into that, because again, it's about what matters to the client, not to us. This is about exploring their values and then helping to develop the discrepancy. How does vaping at school fit with what matters to them? And then ask about what they want to do, right? If they say that, no, I don't want to get suspended, right? That's not what I want. Okay, avoiding a suspension matters to you. What do you think your next step might be? I'm telling the client, I trust you to figure this out. I'm here to guide you. I'm not moving away. I could also add something like, what do you think your next step might be? And how can I help you with that? What kind of support do you need from me? You're in the driver's seat. Yes, the school has rules, but ultimately you make your decision. And I know that's hard for a lot of us because it's like, but what if they decide they're not going to change? Well, you telling them they have to isn't necessarily going to make that happen either. I have a better chance of engaging with them, giving them that autonomy, collaborating with them, telling them I'm here to support them, than coming in and saying, you got caught, you're going to get suspended, you have to quit. Okay, next scenarios. Vaping prevents me from smoking. Also a very common one. Validate that first, because isn't that true? It is true. It's a valid statement. So let me validate and reflect that. And again, I might explore their long-term goals. What are their values? How does this fit? I'm going to shift my goal from harm reduction to autonomy. Again, they get to make that decision. I'm going to try and, provide some of that information, evoke the ambivalence, etc. The dual use, weed and vaping. Again, what's the focus of the conversation here? I can come in and tell them, it's best, the research says it's best if you quit everything at once. That might be true, but is that what the client wants? So let's focus the conversation. Of the two, which feels more concerning to you right now? If you decided to change one first, what would it be? Let them choose the target. You can work with that. I can quit anytime. This is change talk. This is great. This is the person is telling you they can do this. They're able to. So let me get more of that. I'm curious about this, and I'm going to use the scaling question. You feel confident. Okay, so if you ever decided to stop, how hard do you think it would be on a scale from 0 to 10, right? So they're giving you change talk here. You can use that. The client is stuck in a rut. They stalled during quitting. So this one was about client has started quitting. They were doing okay initially, and then they're now stuck and they can't get to the finish line. So some strategies here, looking back, looking forward. So that might sound like, what was working earlier in your quit attempt? What's different now? To get them to think about, okay, well, I was doing this and that worked. Why isn't that working now? What's changed? What helped you get through those tough moments before? And again, that's going to evoke change talk and will help build some of their self-efficacy. Okay, so just to kind of bring it to a close, our job is actually not to make them quit. I know even if you work in a cessation clinic, that's your job. Technically, it's actually not. It's to make them think about quitting. That's the first step. And if you can do that, that is huge success. And if you do it in a collaborative way that supports autonomy, you demonstrate that empathy, you bring in that spirit, they might choose you to help them with the next steps. So on that note, what's one thing you will do next week to support your clients who vape? We can do a word cloud, or we can put it in the chat, whatever you want, Rachel. I'm good with either one.
We can see maybe if people put it in the chat. If not, I'll put the word cloud up, but oh, there's some coming in.
Yeah, so thanks, Joyce. Consider your likes and dislikes about vaping. And early on, so, I want to just clarify the decisional balance is not part of motivational interviewing, and I don't actually use that. But I do use early on, I do ask them, what is it that vaping does for you? What is it that you like? Because, again, it evokes sustained talk, but while you're engaging, that is helping me to understand the role that it plays. Um, Use the looking forward tool. Yes, I think this is underused, absolutely. And it's like, listen, and we're actually telling people, focus on the present. Let's be mindful, which is great, but maybe that's not going to be helpful with some of our clients. Is can we get them to look forward to the future? What will your life look like? What will it be like? What do you want it to look like? Ask for more values exploration. Yes, I use values with all of my clients. I love it, love it, love it. It's very powerful. Listen and engage rather than offering the solutions. Yes, our gut is to want to problem solve coming from a good place, but they might not be ready. So let's engage. Let's form that relationship with the client. Okay, good, good. I hope you have one takeaway from this. I think I can still take questions. We've got 3 minutes. Otherwise, this is my personal email. You're welcome to email me. I will do my best to help, but thank you. So good to
Thank you,
see some
Rosa.
familiar names. Thank you, Rachel.
That was amazing. We have a couple of minutes if anyone does have some questions. Oh, maybe someone just asked for a concrete example of values exploration.
Yeah, so actually, if you go to the Jody, I'm going to call on you. If is it on the Mint website? If not, I'm happy to share. Bill Miller and Rolnick have made these available. They actually have value cards, so it's an actual exercise you can do with them. You can give them the cards. There's instructions on how to do it as well. Um,
If you send me the link, I can put it in the
okay.
email that I send out to people.
Okay, perfect. I will do that. That's their version. The version that I actually use is from acceptance and commitment based therapy. I find it actually a little bit easier to follow. Not easier, it's just a different way of doing it, but the value cards are really, really helpful. And of
Jody
course,
just
they
put
have,
it in the chat too.
okay, perfect. Thank you. Team effort. Love it. What are some of the differences between MI for smoking versus vaping cessation, in your opinion? I actually don't think there are differences, to be honest with you. I think the differences are more in our attitude and what we come to the table with in terms of our perspectives and perception of vaping versus smoking. Some people believe in harm reduction, some people don't. Some people think they have to stop vaping. I think it's more about that versus the motivational interviewing. Remember that MI is a communication tool. It's a way of communicating. And so it's not like, well, one ambivalence is different than the other. It's really about listening to the client and understanding. So I actually don't think they're it. Not this is my opinion. I don't know if there are some other MI, I want to say people who have lots of experience with MI if they disagree, but there is no difference. But pay attention to your biases that you're bringing. What are your beliefs about vaping versus smoking? Oh, sorry, Rachel. That one skip.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was gonna say I don't think there are any more questions. A lot of thank yous because that was great. Thank you for taking the time to come in today, Rosa. I know it's one, so if anyone does need to leave at this point, feel free to. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm just gonna give some final reminders. One where again, if you wanted to receive a letter of completion for this webinar, to fill out the post-learning assessment and evaluation, and you'll have a week to complete those from the date that they're sent. I don't know if people can see. And then we have another webinar coming up next month. It'll be in April, and it will be one of our Ask the Experts vaping Q&As with Dr. Peter Selby and Dr. Milinkara. And we do have an archived list of our past webinars, as well as schedule for our future webinars on the Intrepid Lab website. But for now, thank you. Thank you again, Rosa. That was very
Thanks for
engaging.
inviting me. So
We're
good to
excited.
be back.
Yeah.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, Rosa.